and welcome to the Unsolicited Astrology podcast for July 2025, the one that you didn't know that you needed. July 2025 is a very interesting month for us. I'm Starlene Brighter. This is Mark Matheny. We do these videos monthly to talk about the forecast for the month ahead. And today we're doing for July, even though it is still June 26th. Usually we do them on the last Thursday of the month. Sometimes it's the first Thursday of the month. It really depends on our schedules, but you can always check us out and you can, like, follow, share, all that stuff. So, hi, Mark. How are you today? How did you live through June? Tell me first.
How did I what?
Live through June. How was June for you? Because June was like crazy.
Uh, yeah, it was just varying levels of clown world. It's just like you don't know what clown's gonna pop out of the hat on any day. So
Right.
it's so this has been I don't want to say I'm a control freak, but I like to have control of at least certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just the universe just kind of like, telling me that like I'm not really in control of anything.
Mm-hmm. Oh my
And
God.
so
I totally agree with that.
that's my that's my bear to cross at this time. It's-
That's your cross a bear, is how you say it, unless you want to put a bear on your back and then, I don't know, climb up across.
I I like to say things backwards to see
I do too.
if
I'm an Aquarius, so we do things a little weird thing. Oh my gosh.
uh,
Okay. So we're going to unpack July. What is the theme, the biggest theme that you've got going on for July astrologically, aside from Mercury retrograde, which is going to be a whole bunch of additional fun. I think that's the minorest thing maybe, but Mercury retrograde is always fun. But what is your big take on July?
um so for July and August, this is a glimpse into the future, because once we get into like spring of next year, we're going to have all these outer planets are going to be in the signs that after we hit July 7th, that's the the four outer planets are going to be in those signs for the next 2.5 and most of them longer years. So I've said this 100 times, we're in the exact opposite energy of where we were in 2020. Everything is outwardly focused now, or it's gonna be. Um, we're gonna get a glimpse from July 7th through the beginning of September of what things are going to be like in the future. That's just from next spring. Um, thing it's I would say for the next 2 months, it's crucial to find out where you're getting buried and who's burying you. Like anything that's out of control, anything that like you are barely keeping your head above water or head below water, as I like to say, as a Pisces joke. Um, you're gonna that's anything that's a problem in July and August is
Have
really
that.
going to be a problem next year.
Yep.
So you'll have parts of you have this fall into early next year to kind of find out fixes for those areas where you're just like, okay, I can't deal with this, I can't live with this. You've got this fall to figure out the fix for it, because once we get into spring of next year, that there's no stopping. There's no stopping the train that's coming. There's no stopping it. And so I would say weeding things out, cleaning things, streamlining, uh, cutting out habits, activities, whatever that are not essential or helpful. that's going to be your goal for this fall, is to figure out fixes for these, because it is going to slow down this fall, because Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are all going to retrograde back into Pisces and Taurus. So you got to have some time to figure it. But I'd say identifying what the problems are is going to be key for July and August, because they're not going to just magically get better. They're
Right.
going to come back next year, and there's not going to be the break that we're going to get this fall.
Right.
So
And what you're
put
referring,
out fires, streamline things in July and August.
right. And what you're referring to on some level, for those that don't know, I think is like just all of the outer planets. The outer planets moving signs is a big deal. A lot of the outer planets stay into, well, Neptune itself is about what, 14 years or 20 years? I don't remember.
It's like 12 to 14,
Okay,
depending
yeah,
on
it
what
depends
sign.
on the sign, right? So that obviously doesn't happen very often. Uranus is what, 7 years, I think, roughly, because they all
Yeah,
vary a little bit.
7.
And then Pluto just moved into Aquarius like earlier this year, but it's going retrograde almost back to the 0 degrees. It's at 1 degrees and change. You said like almost 1.5 degrees. So all of these planets right at the very beginning of the zodiac signs that they're moving into is huge. It's a big shift, and all of them happening at one time is, it makes my skin crawl. Just knowing
Yeah.
that like so many things are happening all at once. And not only that, we have Saturn and we have Neptune, which I have been so Pollyanna about this until like it started happening in June. Like, oh, it's just going to be about people wanting to materialize the physical, or the materialize what they cannot, their ideals, like God or whatever their ideals are. And like as soon as they get really close and conjunct, it ends up like starting a war. Israel, not to get like into that, but like really a war started and America got into it. Is like, I was wondering if World War III was going on. Hope we don't get flagged for this one, but like in reality, that's it. Like, is that what's really going to happen here? I don't know that this is over with over there either, because I follow that quite closely. But I think that it's really kind of something else. Yeah. So what's he mean by that? Brittany, thanks for hope I explained
Yeah.
it.
So Saturn rules structures, and it's not just um, it's not just physical structures. It's like how we structure our reality, how we have our lives structured. I know I've said this 100 times before. Whatever sign your Saturn is in, a lot of times like that. That's how we structure our reality, and that's how uh, you'll kind of interact with things, because that's how you kind of set things up. So
Mhm.
the the number of, just in this last like month, let's see, when did Saturn enter Aries? So the late May 25th, Saturn entered Aries. So we're just a month into this. So
Mhm.
just in the last month, the number of people leaving or quitting their jobs, the number of people, just of my friends that are moving, there, if that 2 degrees of Aries is hitting in your chart, I think it's probably pretty apparent right now, because
Yeah.
like it's not there. There's not the level of patience that there is. There's this uh, underlying anxiety to move and to uh, put yourself in better position, because like things are not really going to calm down,
Right.
except for a couple months at the end of the year, first month or two of next year. But then we're in every day is just going to pass by in like 2 seconds. I mean, I'm already feeling that, like every day I get up and the day's over.
No, seriously.
Just everything is going,
Same.
and a vast majority of my time now is spent trying to fix things that other people have screwed up. Because there's a whole lot of action, yet very little thinking. So
very little like putting it in there. Yes. And
yeah, it's just instinctual. It's just instinctual behavior, but not looking down the road as to where things are going to lead. And two, like when jobs and things are not going as you wish, I can promise you'll probably get an opportunity here in the next couple months to, by your choice or by someone else's choice.
Yeah, that's
most likely by someone else's choice. That situation is very likely to change, even if it's just your managers or owners or your superiors at work. All that is very likely to change here shortly. We're going to be in uncharted territory. I'm pretty good at researching, but having Saturn and Neptune, two outer planets stationed within like 9 days of each other at the same degree of the same sign, I've not been able to find where that's ever happened.
Right.
I don't
done the same, and I've been looking. I think it was like in like the early 200s BC or AD. I cannot remember at this. It was so irrelevant that I didn't even like dig too far into it. That when they were conjunct, but it was Aries, but it wasn't like the first degrees. So it was kind of crazy. I don't know that the world is ready for this. Well, maybe they are, and that's why things need to change, and a catalyst needs to happen to get the change to happen. Something needs to push us over the edge. because what has gone on, as we all know, if you've lived on Earth since 2020, the world's been really crazy, right? And so now we're getting an opportunity to look at our ideals, which is the Neptune thing. And when you think about the whole situation geopolitically, right? And I'm really like looking at this stuff clearly. You can see where people are fighting over their ideals. Like, I'm right, you're right, I'm right, and then chaos happens, and it's on a personal level and it's on a global level. So when you catch yourself in that moment of like trying to be right, like check yourself. My honest opinion on that is like, check yourself, because you might be right and they might be right, but it doesn't have to be a clash. It doesn't have to be the power of wills to where who's most important. So if you paid attention to the news at all, which I'm sure you have, Mark, but that last whole missile thing at Qatar was like because the Iranian regime government wanted to like save face. They actually I don't know if you know this, but they actually told them the missiles were coming. So it's like, I just want to save face and show you that and that's just an example of what it's like. You can take that down to a personal level. And if you're having conflict or difficulty with someone, that, I want to save face thing is really because of my ideals, is really not healthy. It's going to get you into a kaboom, Aries, fiery pit of hell. So check yourself. That's what I think is really important, because if you don't, I think you can have chaos that isn't necessarily necessary. The energy has to be channeled in some way to be healthy. So think about ways you can channel it instead of like conflict and frustration, because I don't think the conflict in the world with all of what's been going on is over. Do you?
Oh, no. I promise you, we're just getting started.
Right. That's exactly what I feel. And it's like
July
Yeah.
4th through 13th will show us the next level of this.
Right. And exactly. And I was going to just say that, like, in reality, like, I wouldn't go anywhere near anything July 4th. I'm an American. I'm patriotic. I love our country. However, I wouldn't go into a crowd in July 4th. And this is just my own personal opinion, shit's going to go down. I said it.
Yeah.
But it's going to go down. Something's going to happen. I want to be in the comfort of my own home, because if that's where I'm choosing to be buried, as you said, I would rather have that be like somewhere where I'm not like in the middle of a crowd getting trampled. You know what I mean? Or chaos is going on. So, you know, I know people love the 4th of July. I get it. I am very patriotic. I love our country, because although it's not perfect, I think it's looking at the world. We're really, you know, we're really free, and that world is not like that. There's so many countries and things that are just not like that. Right. So do you want to say anything about the end of June before we start into July?
So I mean, like talking about things that have never had, like ultra rare occurrences. I mean, that the moon is in a sign for a little bit over 2 to 2.5 days. For you know, every 2 to 2.5 days it changes signs.
Right.
We just had this past Monday and Tuesday, which was June 23rd and 24th. We had a 43-hour moon void of course period. It was almost 2 entire days. Anything you did this past Monday and Tuesday, you can pretty much bet you're going to have to go redo that.
Yes.
Or that it is not as set in stone as you think it was.
Right.
Because that's usually, sometimes the moon void of course periods are like, and the moon void of course is when the moon has made its last exact aspect to another planet while it's in that sign. Mm-hmm. And before it moves into the next sign, it's said the moon is void of course.
Right.
Which means there's no emotional input or emphasis on anything. It's just kind of you're acting on autopilot. And so normally the moon void of course periods are like 2 or 3 hours or something. That's the norm.
Yeah, like sometimes a half an hour. Yeah, they're just like, or sometimes 6 hours. Yeah. But like, really, to have it 2 days is very, you know. I mean, I don't know how often that happens. I'd have to look to see. It's really.
I mean, it can't. That's got to be a once in 1,000 years thing, because you've got to have every single planet in the first couple degrees of a sign.
Right.
Of whatever sign they're in.
I just wanted to share that.
That's the only way you can get that.
The best thing that happened to me in June. This is Soul. So I have 4 cats, and this is Soul. And he's too little yet, but he's going to marry Luna, who's my black and white cat. She's a little tuxedo. So this is my baby. I've been looking for you for a while. I just wanted to share him. He likes to fight with Saturn. My older, he's my 10-year-old cat, but he thinks he's like 2. So like they like to fight. So I said, okay, stay in here with me. I have to always like referee them. I'm like, no, Saturn and the Sun can't fight. Oh, it's funny. So, okay, let's dig into July. July 4th, we already touched on it. So July 4th, Neptune stations retrograde at 2 Aries. So yeah, what are you feeling about this station? How it's going to like be affecting people and all of that?
Right. So usually like Neptune, so when a planet stations for about a week, maybe a little bit longer on either end of the station date, that planet's energy is much greater than it normally is, because it's stationary. So it's you're getting the full force of that planet's energy. So Neptune has to do with the non-3D stuff. That's our subconscious, spiritual stuff. You know, things that are hidden and not in the, you know, things that we cannot touch, see, and feel. And so since Neptune entered Aries at the end of March 30th of this year, Neptune stepped into Aries from where it had been in Pisces, the planet that it rules, or the sign that it rules. Mm-hmm. It's like I think everyone's subconscious, which has been asleep for like 12 years, is like suddenly like woken up. And so that's the angry, the impatient, just kind of that constant energy, just the constant uh, shifting and reactionary type stuff. That's Neptune's entrance into Aries. Now, this fall, it's going to retrograde back into Pisces for a few months, and then it'll be like end of next February, end of next January, where Neptune will move into Aries for the duration of its whatever 12-year transit or whatever. Um, so things are not always real when there's a Neptune station. If you look back at things that are questionable, we'll say like propaganda is a Neptune function. So just when you see there's pertinent Neptune things happening, I tend to like not believe anything that I see in the news media or anything. And just with the rate that artificial intelligence and stuff is going, I would not believe much of anything that I saw in the news, as that's really what has been happening.
Can I ask you a question?
There's definitely there's definitely a high degree of propaganda and and maybe not even it may not even be purposeful. It may just people don't think that well. Like around Neptune stations, they tend the daydreaming, fantasizing type aspect of our consciousness is in full gear at that point.
That's a good point. And can I ask you a question about what you just said? Do you ever believe that the news is not propaganda? No, I know you don't.
No. It's always biased depending,
of course,
depending on what your source is. I mean, the news is always biased to that side or the other. But I'd say it's even more pertinent when so the big lies happen around like the Neptune stations and stuff.
Yeah. Wasn't it Neptune station with Uranus? Was it Neptune and Uranus when Fukushima happened? Or Uranus? Uranus was in it. I know that. It was a station when one of them went station and then the other one went station a couple of days later. I don't know. It was like one after the other, and like that was really crazy because it was right on the ocean, and it's like, is the world gonna get polluted with all of this?
It was Uranus stationing, which is the earthquake, and then it was Neptune entering Pisces, which was the tsunami.
Yeah.
Because Uranus has to do with earthquakes, and then Neptune, of course, rules the oceans. So we got, since both of those made a big event close to each other, that's when we got the Fukushima
or Fukushima, yeah.
thing.
Yeah. So I feel like that's our start. This is, and July 4th, a lot of Americans, which probably most of the people watching are Americans, are out celebrating. So like Mark said, I think it's important to be aware of what's around you. People are not necessarily what they say, what they do. Their ideals are being put inward, instead of outward. That's the retrograde energy, putting it in more internalized. And this is not just hitting one person, it's globally. We're all going through these transits. It will be affecting you more on if it's hitting something in your chart, if it's something in any early degree sign, it will be affecting you in some way or another. So that's just part of it. Okay. Well, we move on a little bit in the month, and we have I guess it's July 4th too. Venus going into Gemini. So Venus goes into Gemini for what, about 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Venus and Gemini.
so Venus will be leaving one of the Taurus, which is one of the two signs that it rules. Venus rules Taurus and Libra. So when it leaves, so if you just look how the zodiac wheel goes, there's a feminine sign and a masculine sign, feminine, masculine, feminine, masculine. So the feminine signs are more introverted, the masculine signs are more extroverted. So we have these like phases where, like with Venus, we would kind of turn inward for 3 weeks and then outward, then inward, then outward. It's like a clam opening and closing. So then with Venus in Gemini, there's lots of communication and lots of social mingling, things like that. And so what's funny too is like Venus is entering Gemini, which is an air sign. So everyone will be looking into the air on July 4th because of all the fireworks and everything.
Right.
So
I didn't even think about that. Yeah. Yeah. And it's also, I mean, it is connecting with all of the other planets that are in the early degrees too. So it's making this web of energy that, I mean, Venus is generally speaking a more pleasant planet than some of the others, but it's still, it's aspecting all these other outer planets that are not necessarily always pleasant. So it's giving this like idea of like, hey, there's something here, but it's like it's a little diluted, if you will, because of all the other stuff going on. It's not just one thing, but definitely, Venus and Gemini. And I think Venus and Gemini too, like people are more like social, that sort of thing. It makes sense that there's like more things going on, but it's just like keep your head with you. It's important because, maybe your neighbor isn't, keeping their head with them.
Right. So Venus is the twin, or Gemini is the twins. So Gemini has two sides to it. There's the social butterfly, light and fluffy kind of side to it, but also Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So when planets are in Gemini, you can mentally kind of spin out of control a little bit because it doesn't stop, because like Mercury doesn't stop, or like it just keeps, even probably worse so even when it's in Virgo, but it's just a constant, like the mind is just constantly going, and that kind of so that's kind of the good bad twin of Gemini. As the good side is it's good at communicating, but there can be too much communicating, or it can kind of
spiral,
mentally wear itself out.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that, but yeah, Gemini is definitely good at that communication, that the weaving between the things, the moving, connecting the dots, if you will, kind of like Aquarius is, but in like more personal level. Aquarian's more like the idea of globally, and we've got Pluto in early sign of Aquarius. So we've got which is also that weaving together, and we've got all the other planets doing all of the same stuff. And actually Venus is really close to Uranus too during this time. I don't actually, Uranus enters Gemini on July 7th. I didn't look at the list, but that is actually the next thing we're going to talk about. So I was going to say it's like really close. So Venus and Uranus are a couple days apart from moving into the site of Gemini. If you are born on the cusp of Gemini and Taurus, enjoy the spontaneous fun, but don't expect it to last forever. Like have fun and be careful, because like Uranus can be a little bit treacherous, especially because it's not just aspecting Venus, but it's aspecting all these other planets that are at the end or the beginning of the zodiac sign that they're in. But it is saying like enjoy that spontaneity, but this is just a moment in time. It's just a little glyph. You can look back at some point in your life this few weeks was XYZ, but there'll be something there, especially if you have personal planets or your own chart in like early Gemini. So that's definitely a thing to be thinking of. What do you feel about Uranus moving into Gemini?
So to add on to July 4th there, there were so many big things this month that we've been trying to just put the really big things in there, but just add on to that, the Uranus is at 29 degrees Taurus already right now.
Yeah, it is.
So Taurus tends to balance or temper the energy a little bit, because it's not like Taurus isn't really a spastic sign or hyper. Usually Taurus is pretty easy flowing.
Mm-hmm.
But once Uranus goes into Gemini, we're in a whole new ball game. And actually, on the morning of July 4th, there's a Venus-Uranus conjunction, which was my original point there. So there's a Venus-Uranus conjunction at 8:45 in the morning on July 4th. And then Venus enters Gemini like late morning. So there's all kinds of just really tricky aspects on July 4th. There's a Moon Pluto square, there's a Moon Mercury square, and Neptune is exactly stationing. So there's all kinds of stuff going on July 4th. And the moon's in Scorpio that day too, which usually just, if nothing else, adds another layer of intensity to the proceedings.
Yeah, it is another layer of intensity.
We were kind of pointing out the big things. There's several other smaller things like that, like the Venus-Uranus conjunction and stuff. So that just tells you that there's likely to be surprising events on that day.
Yes.
That's definitely a day to be aware.
So I've been tracking this asteroid. It's called Hidalgo because I read a book and I'm doing research on ADHD people. And by the way, if you have ADHD or you know someone that has ADHD, you can go to my website, researchadhd.com, and you can participate in the research thing, read about it there. But I've been tracking Hidalgo because I read a book that a woman did research already on, and when you do research, you always want to look at what other people have done, and then figure out, does it work still, or is there a change, or what's going on with that. So if you look at Hidalgo, it is actually at 3 degrees of Sagittarius on July 4th, which is really close to being opposite of the Venus and Uranus. So that gives, and Hidalgo is a very interesting planet. So, the planets, as they go around the sun, they're not like going around like in a perfect circle. Like you see the diagram of the universe, they're the solar system. They're not going around in a perfect circle. Some of them are a little tilted. Hidalgo its axis is very eccentric, and it's not circular, so, and it's very like, goes up and down like this instead of like across with the sun. And so there's chaos going on here. It's very north and south of the ecliptic plane. So what happens when you put Hidalgo into the chart is that it actually connects with both Pluto, which is at 3 degrees of Aquarius. This is July 4th. It connects with Saturn and Neptune, which is at almost 2 degrees, 1 and 2 degrees of Aries, which is sextile, and then it goes back to sextile to Uranus and Venus, and then opposite of Hidalgo. So there is a planet there's an asteroid that is connecting all of these planets together. Which, okay, so if we're going to stop and think for a second, Uranus and Venus, to me that could be like a fling. Like if it was just Uranus and Venus, and like that was going on in someone's chart, I would say go have fun, have a fling, but don't expect to get married to this person. And that's just like a metaphor, but like I would say it's a moment of having fun. But then you want to connect it with Saturn and Neptune, you want to connect it with Pluto, and you want to connect it with this really crazy asteroid. chaos. And mark my words, I feel like July 4th is going to be very chaotic. I feel like there could be more major issues bigger than our own personal lives, but I think in our personal lives we'll also be dealing with a lot of stuff too. So, I don't know. Do you ever track asteroids? Do you ever pay attention to them or no?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many of them.
Right.
It's
That's why
hard.
I only pick a few. Right.
But I definitely, yeah, like the one. So there's one that's in the late degrees of Taurus, and when the stuff happened with the assassination attempts last year in August, that was conjunct Uranus. That asteroid was conjunct Uranus, and I think there was like a fixed T square or something happening too. Um, so yeah, so there. I definitely I probably pay the most attention to Chiron, but there's definitely
Yeah.
The asteroids are definitely helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, they
It
are.
just gets a lot to keep track of all 7,000 of them or whatever.
Yeah, no, seriously, they are. And I mean, I know someone that's written books about Dave Campbell about asteroids and stuff like that. He's wonderful. But like you said, and I know people that look at like trans-Neptunian planets or something. It's kind of like a thing where you have to choose what you look at because there's so much out there. It's like looking in the sky and going, well, okay, what are you all doing? How is the energy coming to me and how is it being expressed outward? So it's kind of like narrowing that down. But that's why I look at Hidalgo, because of the ADHD aspect, and I do see it actually playing out in vibrations. So I hope to get a few more people in my study before I can start publishing results and like sharing the results of my study, because it's pretty fascinating to see how it works out in people. But that's just on another topic. Okay, so the fun part of this this coming month is going to be the full moon at 19 degrees of Capricorn. What do you have to say about that? And that is on July 10th, by the way.
So just to follow up on the Uranus and Gemini is last time Uranus was in Gemini. Uranus and Gemini often correlates with world wars or big wars. So having that with Saturn and Neptune and Aries, which is Mars, or Aries is the warrior. So the potential for big and long-term conflict is definitely there for the next several years, where there's a lot of things are just going to change rapidly. And I think too, one of the things about Uranus moving into Gemini is like when Venus moves into Gemini, it's still going to be conjunct Uranus, and it's going to be sextile to Saturn and Neptune, and it's going to be trine to Pluto. So then when we have Uranus move into Gemini, it's going to be sextile to Saturn and Neptune, and it's going to be trine to Pluto and conjunct Venus. So while sextiles and trines are often very good,
not always.
Sometimes you don't want that much momentum.
Right.
If you don't want the clowns to have that much mobility, because my example of this is a lot of the big tornado outbreaks, like the ones we've had the last 2 years. It's been when the moon has been in Gemini at the beginning of Gemini, because it's been trine Pluto. So that's a easy flowing energy between emotions and death, or Pluto, if not death, is transformative events. Sometimes you don't want great access to transformative events.
Right. And one of the things that we Sorry.
And not to mention, Moon in Gemini is an air sign, and Aquarius is an air sign. So with the tornado, you've got more air energy than you want.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is definitely a good point. I wonder, I kind of want to do at some point research on hurricanes because I live in South Florida. That it would be interesting to do. I mean, touch wood, we have not been like hit very hard lately, and I know there's other parts of the United States and other parts of the world that have been, but like, you know, but I wonder about if there's something that we can see in the that's just another train of thought there. But you know, one thing I wanted to add on to what you were saying too is that Hidalgo moves really slow. So Hidalgo is still connecting with everything you just said, and Hidalgo is the planet of chaos. Like, it's the planet of, like, not the planet, it is the asteroid of chaotic being. You know, I have a whole book on it. It's like very interesting. I didn't do the research for this. I'm just doing the research for ADHD and tracking it. But, you know, from what I see, and it's connecting with these other planets, it makes sense. So, you know, further research is definitely being done. By the way, if you don't know, I want to share this. This is just being announced, and we haven't put the website up yet, but the website is going up in the next couple of days. We are doing a conference called the Cosmic Discovery Conference. It is going to be an evidence-based research astrology conference in Nashville in April. I think it's the 24th, 25th, 26th of next year. So you can meet me. I will be there, and I will. I'm one of the organizers and one of the board members of Cosmobiology Institute, which is hosting the conference. We don't, like I said, we don't have the speakers yet, but we're putting out a call to astrologers that will want to present evidence-based research at the conference. We're not just looking at astrologers too, we're looking at the scientific community because we're using evidence-based models to do it. So it's pretty cool, and I'm excited about that. And this is just like a little prelude, but I'm very excited to be able to start sharing this kind of work, you know, in this way. So yeah, that's where my research brain goes to, because that's, you know, just me, the analytical Aquarius that I am. So why don't you tell us about the full moon in Capricorn?
Yeah, so when you have a lot of outer planet shifting and changing signs and stations and stuff, sometimes you have to find like what the trigger point's going to be for the big events. And so I think that the full moon is probably a good place to start for the trigger point.
Have you looked at the midpoints for the full moon? Because the midpoints are pretty, like.
I have not. What did you find?
So Saturn's at the midpoint of Uranus and Pluto at 23 minutes. This is on the day of the full moon. Jupiter is at the midpoint of Mercury and Uranus at 15 minutes. So conflation of communication, big, huge communication. The Saturn, Uranus, Pluto is like, is that when it starts? Is that when the WW123 starts? Like, I don't want to say that, but really, honestly, like, I wonder if the catalyst to something like is going to be triggered here. Also, we have Neptune at the midpoint of, and I look at really small orb midpoint trees. So there's 3 of them involved. Neptune is at the midpoint of Uranus and Pluto on that day too. It's 38 minutes. So these outer planet ones are going to be really slow. The one with Mercury is going to be a little quicker, you know. And since they're really tight orbs, or less than, they're about a half a degree or less, the ones that I talked about, this is going to be a powerful day. You know, it's going to be intense. So we have the full moon on top of it, so that also makes it like a challenge. You know, I feel like I like to look at the midpoints for some reason. I don't know, just because I look at like where, like you were saying, where is the specific thing? What's the trigger? You know, that's gonna like set it off. That's gonna put the next phase into play, because that's what I look at. We're all in cycles, right? Our life is in cycles. The astrology is in cycles. We go through these patterns and stuff, and we can recognize them. And this is what, you know, this is this is how I look at astrology with those midpoints, and they always seem to have a little kick. They really like hit it up a notch. So I know you like midpoints too. So you look at them sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's like, it's like a conjunct. I mean,
It is.
midpoints are, you have multiple planets. It's like an additional set of aspects.
Yes.
So, it's the midpoint between, two planets. And if you've got, so it's like two planets making an aspect to each other. And when there's a planet at that midpoint, then you're already talking, there's at least 3 or 4 planets working in unison. Like,
exactly.
Sometimes good, sometimes bad.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so I say, but again, too, I get it. The thing I get into with midpoints is the same thing with the asteroids. Is there's so many of them?
That's why
you have to kind of whittle down,
right?
Because you can make yourself nuts.
Yeah, that's why
So,
I like to look at midpoints that are like a half a degree or less, but I will look up to if there's several of them with the same planets. I'll look up to 1.5 degrees, but I won't go over 1.5 degrees. And usually, once it gets to 1 degree, unless there's other planets with very small midpoints in it, I just don't even look at them, because, like you said, I could look at midpoints all day long, because the planets are all doing that constantly, and sometimes they're just reinforcing what's already been going on. So sometimes they're reinforcing the 3 planets that are conjuncting each other, and it's just a reinforcing because they're moving between each other, making these midpoints. And sometimes they're spread about the chart, and they're making these midpoints, and they're just reinforcing aspects that are already going on. It's just like an extra layer, if you will. Yeah.
And so something else I forgot to throw in about Uranus and Gemini is that Uranus is the internet, and Gemini is a communicative sign. So I would say by July 7th, we become aware, at least a little bit more aware of like how far artificial intelligence has gone just in like the last year or two. I think it's way, 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 way past where anybody thinks it's going. I think we're already way past where anybody thinks it's going.
Yeah, there's no like stopping it at this point.
Yeah, I can promise you that once we hit July 7th, for the next few months after that, and for the long term after next spring, things are going to go at a dizzying pace, and you're going to have to pick and choose your battles, because things are going to come at you so fast all day long, every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to stop. So you're going to have to pick and choose what the most important things are, which is part of the Venus and Uranus and Taurus transits. Is the Taurus part of Venus is your own personal morals, your own personal values, your own personal needs, your security system, your comfort system. That's all Venus and Taurus stuff. That's all Taurus stuff. So having that go into Gemini while Uranus goes into Gemini, you're going to get a glimpse of how fast things are going to go. And with all 4 of those outer planets in sextiles and trines to each other, like July and August are not even going to exist. They're going to be gone in a heartbeat.
When you look at the year, like July and August are like a special kind of worse. Don't you agree? They're a special kind of terror. I don't know. Is that the right way to say it? I sound like I'm being really like angry or frustrated or something. Maybe the planets are just being channeled through me, but like honestly, it is a special kind of crazy, and it's just the whole, when you look at a year overall, I'll have to go back at our year view and see what we talked about then, because it's just
fraught with danger.
Fraught with danger. That's a good way to put it. And so be careful. Like, don't be the person that goes out in the chaos and does the chaotic things like we've seen.
Right. Nobody needs to throw any additional gasoline on the fire. The
No,
fire is in good. The fire's in good shape at this point. The fire does not need anybody's help.
It's not contained either. So just.
Yeah. I think looking back at our beginning of the year thing, I think we picked out a March, April.
Oops. So I guess Mark disappeared on me, but he'll be back. So here he is. All right.
Yeah, I think we picked out April, July, September as the three big energy points of the year, because with September, not to jump too far ahead, but we have those eclipses in the end of Virgo, Pisces.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Finish that set of eclipses up, so that's going to be its own
bit of craziness. Yeah.
Its own special vortex of clowns.
Vortex of clowns. Love it.
Yeah. So too, to kind of put all of this in theory, things are already going a million miles an hour. Uranus moving from Taurus, which is one of the slowest moving signs, into Gemini, and then having a full moon on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's really going to things are going to be going at lightning speed. And I wanted to throw something else in. You said a minute ago about Neptune being on the midpoint of around the full moon.
Yeah. It was Neptune at the point of Uranus and Pluto.
Right. So Pluto is death. Uranus is chaos. So Neptune, the negative side is Neptune, and what I've found is that people will often blame the wrong person or wrong party or wrong parties.
Bingo.
For who is responsible
ding, 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 ding,
for
ding,
events. So yes. when something happens here between the 4th and 13th, whoever the mainstream media says is behind it, I'm going to be skeptical and do my own research on it.
Yeah, look at your own. Look at your own research. So people do this to me all the time, which I love. I love when people share things with me, because I'm the Aquarius. I was telling him an Aquarius. I love it, but people do this all the time. Well, they send me clips of something, right? And then I will of like somebody political talking, right? And it'll be taken so out of context, the clip, but it's not the person that's sending to me fault. So I'll go and I'll watch the entire clip, the entire like whatever. Say it's Trump or something. Right. And I want to know, like, what did he really say and how is he saying it? And I think this is how misinformation happens, but under the guise of it's right because Trump did say it or something, but it's taken completely out of context. And I'm not saying Trump's great or bad, for that matter. It doesn't matter. And I'm just saying, like, this is exactly what happens. Then it could be, whoever else it could be. I mean, they do it to all the politicians, to be honest with you. So then you look at it, you look at the whole thing, and you're like, oh, he didn't actually say that. He said this with this, all of it behind you. But this is the Neptune, thing that's like not right. And I will say something too. Right now, today, which is, what is the date today? Today is July
June 26th.
June 26th. The Neptune Uranus Pluto is at 48 minutes orb. So it just gets stronger by the time it gets to the full moon. So it's already in orb, like it's already in with like less than a degree orb from each other. So this is because these are all slow moving planets. Then the Saturn Uranus Uranus, Pluto is at a 21-minute orb. This is now, today, June 26th. So these things are already happening. They're just going to get more intense as we get to the full moon. So I think that's why I love looking at these midpoints, and especially the outer planets, because they're seasons of our life, right? And they move so slow, and then when they go retrograde around the same time, and they usually do, then you have that, and then you have something else that sets it off, which like a full moon. Although it's not involving the moon or the sun in these midpoints, there's still like underlying things that are going on. So that's what's happening. And what you said about like not like blaming the wrong person, I think that's so important to see, that the delusion and the illusion of what you think you see is not right. And that's so important for us to all really pay attention to on a big global scale and on a personal scale, because what you're seeing is not necessarily real. And that's all I got to say about that. My TED Talk.
I'll give you an example to back up what you're saying. As I'll see, I have probably every political persuasion there is on my Facebook wall, from far left to far right to moderate to don't trust the government to libertarian, everything.
Right. Yeah.
Everything. So I will frequently see people post stuff that Trump has posted on Truth Social. So, some of it good, some of it bad, depending on who's sharing it. And I'll go look because I want to see exactly if that's the correct text. And he didn't post it. And some of it's good, pro-Trump, and some of it's anti-Trump.
Right, exactly.
Almost every single time I go look at it, it's not there. Someone just doctored that to stir everybody up.
Yep.
Whether you're pro or anti.
And the problem is, like,
go ahead.
I'm totally talking over you. I'm sorry. I'm just a little like excited today. No. But when the problem with that is that when you're under that illusionary kind of thing, when you're under that spell, if you will, of illusions, and then you make decisions and you do things when that's going on, and then you get past it and you reflect backwards, you realize that there's like that maybe like something happened, like that was not right, because hindsight is always 20/20. As astrologers, we can always look back and say, oh, the planets are here doing this is what happened in the world. We can do that all day long, but are we perfect at like saying like, hey, this is what's going to happen for sure? We can only look at the past and what was going on then, and know what potentially predict. Some of us are better at it than others because we do more research in the back way, but I mean that's how we do it. That's how it works. It's not like we're just pulling it out of our hat. It doesn't work that way. Astrologers actually looking at the idea of what has happened in the past when this was going on, and the pattern of that, and then looking at it forward. So we're, this idea of the illusion of the delusion of the illusion is going on right now. And so it's really important to kind of keep that in your back pocket and know that as we lead up into this full moon coming up July 10th, that it's just going to be more of it, and it's just going to be more intense, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's going to be, and with Uranus and Gemini, it's going to be happening that much faster.
And
it's so easy to get artificial intelligence and stuff to like make you videos and stuff now that it's
wild.
You're gonna have to hone your inner compass as to what's bullshit and what's not.
That's a really good point too. Yeah, like dropping into your heart. I think that's important for all of us. I mean, and now here's the softer part of me coming out, because I'm just charged from what's going on in the world and everything, and animated just because that's who I am. But when you think about it and you drop into your heart and you say to yourself, is this really what I feel? What I'm being told? Is it truthful? Because we all have that inner compass. We all have that ability to feel something, and we know the bullshit detector is real. We all can feel that in some way or another. Some of us are more tuned in than others, and it's not because they're better or more psychic. It's because they just listen better. So you have to really drop into that heart center and just like, is this real? And you'll know. You'll get your insight. You'll get your view. And that's also part of it too, because I mean, Neptune and Saturn making this, conjunction that's going on and all this stuff in Aries, leading up till next year, as they go backwards and then they come back into being conjunct in the spring next year. This is, for me, I feel like it's been one of these things where it's like, I think something and then I turn around and it happens right there. Have you noticed that? Like, intuition has been like, so on point. Like, I'm like, be careful what you think. You're going to end up manifesting it like this. And this has been my own personal experience, but like, I talk to people all the time, clients all day long and all this stuff. And I do podcasts and all these things. I'm like, I'm that perfect person out in the world. Right. And I have seen it not just for me anecdotally, but I've seen it with clients. I've seen it with friends, family, it's just like, being mindful of that is really important. It helps you to not feel like you're out of control, so like knowing that and trusting that intuition, I think, is super important, because, if your intuition is saying something and what you're seeing outwardly is saying something different, trust your intuition and then verify it, figure it out. Is it really real? Is what you're seeing really going on? Don't make your decisions based on what the outside exterior is, because I think you're making a mistake if you do that. And I think that's an important part of
it. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So is there anything specific other than these midpoints that you're feeling with the moon in Capricorn? Is there anything other than that? Like that wasn't enough?
Well, yeah. Well, I think maybe one of the saving graces here is that right after the full moon, that's the last aspect that the moon in Capricorn is going to make. So it goes void for about 21 hours after that. It's void, of course. So hopefully that diffuse some of the, I mean, I've found that there's usually a pretty intense drop off of energy right after the full moon anyways.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Because there's that pressure release, but then having like the 21-hour moon void of course right afterwards, I think that may play in our favor.
Yeah, that might help the reality of things kind of like calm down, and the midpoints and stuff that we were just talking about be a little bit less. Although the midpoints are still there. They're there for days afterwards. They're not just, they're not, like I said, they're going on now, right now. These outer planet midpoints, they're happening right now. It just gets more intense when we get closer to the full moon. So, okay, let's look at our next thing.
Just to add on to that real quick, as far as like the moon void of course, I think another thought on that is you may still have disturbing thoughts when the moon is void of course, but you're not going to have the energy or emotional tribulation to it to act on any crazy ideas that come through your head. So that's another benefit of it. Gives you time to think before you act.
Yeah, that's a good point. And when just on things to do with that almost whole day of void of course moon, I like to do things that aren't like my brain has to like focus and stuff like that. Like I don't want to develop a website during that day. Like I do that kind of stuff for work, and I don't want to. I want to do something that's like kind of chill. Like I want to go garden. I want to go play with my cats. I want to like maybe some writing if I feel inclined to, but I might not to. I might want to take a nap, and I'm not a napper. But like those kinds of things are what you want to kind of honor during those void of course moons. And if you had Monday, was it Monday and Tuesday, right? Or was it Sunday and Monday that was the void?
It was Monday and Tuesday.
Okay, so it's a Monday and Tuesday. So if you were feeling that way Monday and Tuesday, that's just an experience that you can kind of relate to moving forward with how the void of course can affect you, you know? Yeah.
And just a quick, because I pay close attention to all the weird stuff. So as far as the void of course moon and naps, that's a great time to get a nap in, because like your body can actually and your brain can actually relax a little bit, because it's done going a million miles an hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's a good. Hey, here, let me rephrase that. A nap during, or even just during your regular sleep time, is probably more regenerative when the moon is void of course than it is when there's like, a Uranus station or something. Because like, even though you can still sleep when there's a Uranus station, it's like your body's twitching and your brain's going a million miles an hour. You're actually able to relax more when the moon's void of course, because you don't have that emotional stimulus poking at you.
Yeah, I know. When the moon and Uranus are conjunct, I almost always know it, like, and I might not know it because I've like looked at the chart, but I know it like in my body, because I cannot, like, I'm like up all night, like, and I'm like, what is going on? I look, it's, oh, the moon and Uranus are conjunct. That happens once a month, so it's like, for some reason, that I just can't that night. That if it's at night, if it's in the day, it doesn't affect me. But I don't always constantly track the moon just because it moves so quickly. I do pay attention to the astrology, of course, but I can just feel it. There's a certain special kind of like going on when I don't know how to explain it other than that, but when the moon and Uranus are conjunct. But yeah, the Uranus stations can be that way too.
You develop a taste or a sense for it.
Yeah, I mean, for years I wrote about
when something's happening before you look up and see it.
Yeah. I mean, and for years I wrote about the moon cycles going every single day for years with multiple people, and all that. And I mean, I just don't have the time to do it now, but I developed a sensitivity to understanding how that feels, at least for me, my body, and how the moon aspecting all these planets is like, I was living through it as I was writing it. It's really interesting to do that. If you're not familiar with astrology and you want to learn about astrology, that might be a good place to start. Like, think about, just what the transits are doing. Like the moon, get to know what the planets are doing, and then like, how are they affecting you? How are you feeling your body? I always tell my students, because I teach astrology too, is like, journal. I do that in a digital sense with all of my students, and it's really eye-opening to see what they're journaling. I do it with them. I'm like, this is what's going on in my life, because I want to share, you learn by experience with the astrology, and I think that's why the best astrologers are the older astrologers, because they've lived through it. They've lived through all those like things, So
yeah, I would add on to that too, is like the two best ways to learn astrology is just for a month, just follow the moon through your chart and see what aspects it's making, and see when the moon's and see how your emotions or your level of crazy move up and down with each with each transit, with each aspect the moon's making.
Mm-hmm.
And then two, the other thing, and this, let's see, do I want to do this or not?
I'm scared.
Yeah, no, nobody's watching anyway, so I'll just go ahead and do this. So my problem with a lot of the like TikTok astrologers
Sorry.
and stuff now is, I know they don't own a physical ephemeris, because I see so many people miss big stuff or post incorrect stuff that I don't like. my little pocket astrologer here. I mean, I have three large ephemerises with different year things, but like I've got all these yearly guides. I've got all there's stuff written. I mean, look at this week. I've got all the important stuff is written in the Llewellyn Daily Planetary Guide. To get one every year.
Yep, me too.
So
And
and
mine
there's notes in every week.
for every. I
But
almost
I
write
think
it every day. Right.
yeah, I have stuff written on more days than not. Probably I have stuff written in there, and I
Right.
use it as a we use it as a book too for when we have stuff going on. Appointments, doctor's appointments, hay deliveries, work schedule changes. It's all right there, and it's all kind of like a shorthand journal.
Mm-hmm.
But that's I went so way off target. So the second the second thing to do to learn astrology is um oh, do I even not even have the big one up here? Oh well. So I have one of the big ephemerises worn to crap, but just flip through that and just with the mindset of what was going on in your life. And if you just flip through that and look, just have a copy of your chart and just look through the ephemeris. I got fired from a job on this day. What was going on? My dad died on this day. I
What was
had a
going on?
great date on this day. Was on vacation this time. I moved this time. If you go and look at the big stuff in your life and what was going on, that will give you that's a good first step to figuring out how to use this, and then
Mm-hmm.
combine that with following the moon through your chart just like for a month or two. That'll give you a very good set of basics that you can build on.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, completely. And, you know, going back in hindsight before, or like, I can't remember what astrologer said it. I want to say it was Rob Hand, but I might be completely wrong about it. It might have been Lee Lehman. It was one of the traditional astrologers that said when you are an astrologer, you're a collector of dates. And that's true. So every significant thing I put into my program so that I mean, I might not even really be like studying the chart at that moment, but if I have a significant situation in my life, I put the chart, I take the date, and if I can take the time, I take it down because I can reflect backwards and I can see, oh, wow, okay. And like, it helps you to understand what's going on with you. And you could just you don't have to have a big program to do that. You can use an ephemeris like Mark was showing you, or you can just have a journal that you write the date and time down on. Everything that I journal myself, I also write the time and date down because I'm like, okay, here's the vibe I'm going through now. I might want to look at that and look back at my journal and think like, what was going on astrologically. Usually when I'm journaling, I'm not necessarily thinking about that unless I'm writing about astrology. But the idea of like what's happening, it helps you understand yourself more. It helps you understand how you're intertwined in the universe, because we are all like intertwined in this fabric, if you will, of the universe. And the planets aren't like making us do things. We're just picking up on their vibe. We're just there with it. We're flowing with it, and that can motivate us to do something or not, and that can push us in a certain direction or not. And I think that's the beauty of astrology, because you get to understand it, and that's what moves you forward. That's what pushes you to understand yourself better in a deeper way. Yeah. So.
Right, and I think it's gone, but I had it. Well, just move forward. I forget. Saturn station's retro. Yeah, I had some probably irrelevant thought that went through there. Maybe it'll pop back up.
It happens.
But yeah.
Yeah. So
yes.
the next one for us to talk about is July 13th, Saturn station retrograde to Aries. So my son has a 3-degree Aries ascendant and Saturn. So my baby, I hope he comes home. He's in another state for me, but he's having a first Saturn return. So not quite, actually. It goes retrograde before it actually hits his first Saturn return. But anybody with 2 Aries, anybody with early Aries degrees, early beginning part of, or even late Neptune, late Pisces has been probably feeling this a lot more than anyone else. But Saturn station retrograde at 2 Aries. What are you feeling about this retrograde? And how far back does it go? It goes back into Pisces.
Yes, Saturn goes back into Pisces, Neptune goes back into Pisces, and then Uranus will go back into Taurus, all in different phases this fall. So it's kind of like a building block thing. Like we added, Pluto went into Aquarius, then we added Neptune and Aries to that in late March. Then in late May, we added Saturn into Aries. We added that on. And now we're adding Uranus into Gemini onto that. Then once we get to like September 1st, Saturn comes back out of that set and it moves back into Pisces. And then Neptune retrogrades back into Pisces late October. Uranus retrogrades back into Taurus early November. And then once they go direct, then they'll move back into those Saturn and Neptune into Aries and Uranus into Gemini. So, but like
and that happens
in the energy
next year, right? When they actually go into the next go in for good.
That's
right?
When they all move in again in different stages.
Right.
But that's to help. The purpose of that is to kind of help us figure out what planet is harshing our reality, and and figuring out the changes that are happening because of that one, so we can kind of figure out the fix for it.
Yeah.
So to mix in with all that, when a planet stations, its energy is more powerful for at least a week on either end. Then the Neptune and Saturn stations are kind of in effect at the same time, even though they're 9 days apart. The overlap there in the middle, which you would kind of feel is the strongest when they're both stationing, a few days on either side. That's right when the Uranus entering Gemini and the full moon is. So that kind of adds 2 more layers to the Uranus entering Gemini and the full moon, and the Venus in Gemini there, because that's a lot of energy at one point.
It really is, and it's intense. So like the more grounded you can be. So I meditate, and I've meditated for so long in my life, but I've tracked hundreds of hours of meditation on an app, but I also meditate on my own. I like visualization meditations and stuff, but lately, because it's been chaotic, I've been meditating a lot more, and that's where I feel like I ground myself, So if you've never meditated before, like look up like a meditation about grounding or something like that on YouTube, and a guided meditation that would help you. I use an app called Balance app, and you can download it from the App Store. I think they give you a year for free. It's really cool, but that's the one I tracked hundreds of hours on, because I do it all the time. It just helps to center me. But I've been doing that's normally like my evening kind of thing, but in the daytime I feel like I need time out. I put myself in time out because I'm like, it's too much, it's too intense. And this is kind of like the prelude. This time period that we're talking about is the prelude to what's going to happen next year, which I think is going to be even a bigger push, because then the planets don't move backwards into the more docile feminine signs. Then they're moving forward into these masculine signs. This is a total switch. The feminine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the feminine is the soft, the sweet, the nurturing, maybe a little bit bitchy, but also still, you know, the feminine. I mean, I'm a woman, I can say this, right? And then the masculine is like, I'm taking charge, I'm doing this, and this is it. And then like moving ahead, you know, and with Aries, and like, come on, man, that's deep. Aries with Saturn and Neptune, whew, that's a heavy one. And then we've already got Pluto in Aquarius, you know, that's just lighting the fire of the Aries energy with that sextile that's going on for a very long time with them. So yeah. So when does the Saturn station Saturn retrograde end, and what degree does it go back to? Did you tell me that already?
So Saturn is going to retrograde back to, I lost something there. Oh, there we go. Okay. So Saturn goes retrograde July
Yeah.
July 13th there.
Right.
Then it's September 1st. September 1st, it retrogrades back into Pisces.
I see.
And then it's to Aries on Valentine's Day when Saturn moves into Aries for good for 2.5 years.
Wow.
And then at that point, so while Neptune is our spiritual consciousness, Saturn is the 3D world. It's social norms, social structures. It's how our world is set up. So it is also very likely that there's more visible 3D events around the 13th than there is around July 4th. So just that whole time period of July 4th through 13th is just kind of fraught with thrills and adventures. It's really going to be, and so like I wanted to throw in with, so like my Saturn is at 2 Aries, and my Sun is 29, almost 0 Aries. It's 29 Pisces. So Saturn and Neptune have been on my Sun for like months now.
So you're going
depending on how big of.
Yeah. So you're having your second Saturn.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know. I didn't even realize that. Wow. Yeah. I haven't.
And that's my second Saturn return isn't exact until next year, but it gets like right up to.
Yeah, it's like my Sun 3 degrees Saturn. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just to kind of show how that part's playing out is Saturn. So yeah, Saturn being on my Saturn, the person who is like my head boss at my 3D Clark Kent day job, they got moved out. They bought, because I kind of work at a training store. So they switch out like the store leaders every once in a while. So there's new leadership at our store, and I know I said this one many years ago on some show we did, but when I back in like 2010, I think it was, when what was it? No, something was on my Saturn. I can look it up real quick. Something was on my Saturn, and so that removes. Uranus. Uranus was conjunct my Saturn. So on the first hit, the guy who was my boss, my direct boss, who was kind of a father figure, they eliminated his position, so he was removed. On the second hit, my dad passed away on the
Mm.
second hit of Uranus conjunct my Saturn, and then on the third hit of Uranus conjunct my Saturn, then the guy who was then kind of my secondary, my the head of the distribution center I worked at, he quit.
Wow.
So three people were removed that were authority figures in my life, one at each of the Uranus hits on my Saturn. They're all removed. They all left for different reasons, but yet somebody in a position of authority over me was removed at each of those. And I liked all three of the people. I didn't want any of the three of them to go, but
Right.
that's just how it was. So to me, that was kind of a call of I was supposed to take the next step and you know, be more of a leader, have more, take more charge, have more authority,
Yeah.
uh, things like that. So that's some of the stuff. If you have Saturn at two or something at Saturn at two Aries, that's something you can expect to see is lots of changes in bosses at your work,
Yeah.
or your work location, maybe changing jobs entirely, authority figures being removed from your periphery. You can expect to see that kind of stuff happening.
Do you think that's because it's an Aries, or do you think it's just because it's the Saturn conjunction?
I think it is Saturn.
Saturn, yeah, because I was gonna say,
Saturn is authority figures.
right,
And
right.
two, so back then it was Uranus conjunct my Saturn. So
Oh,
all
right.
three of those events were surprising. All three of those events were surprising and unexpected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like my dad wasn't sick at the time, and my first boss kind of found out, you know, that his position was being removed, and then nobody knew that the second boss, nobody knew that he was going to be leaving, and so all three of them were surprises to me.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's the Uranus element to
Right.
it. So this one being at Saturn and Neptune hitting that 2 degrees Aries, I think it will be, they'll play out differently, but one of
Right.
those was, my current main boss now uh, was removed.
Wow. It's really interesting that you say that about the Saturn and Uranus, because it was the opposite for me. I had a severe neck injury where I ended up having two surgeries where
I
I had
remember
a
that.
double fusion, and then I mean, I was losing. I couldn't use my right arm, and at the time I just started school. I had a very unbelievable accident. I had a massage, and she like just literally popped a disc in my neck. I felt like I was laying face down, and my hands were like dangling off the thing, and my face was in the little hole. And she's like, "Oh, you have a thing here," and I'm like, "Ow, it hurts." And she's like, "I'm getting out a knot," and then I feel this pop, and then I felt like the tingles on my thumb and my first finger, and every day for like a month, it was a little more than a month, they had put me through therapy, and then they x-rayed my shoulder because it was really painful here, but it didn't know it was coming from my spine because I didn't know what happened. And then they decided a month later to MRI my neck, and they're like, "Oh my God, you have to have this massive surgery. Actually, you have to have two." So the first one was to take my disc out and put in plates and screws and all that stuff. And then the second one, which was the following year, this happened in October of 2012. The second one was to make an artificial disc in another one so I could still move my head around. But, that kind of trauma happened on the day that Saturn conjuncted my Uranus. And I know that's only one aspect, but the day that Saturn conjunct my Uranus, I started astrology school. In the evening and the morning, I had a massage that broke my neck. Like, not the bones, it broke the soft tissue, but Like they told me if I didn't have the surgery right away, that I was this pain that had started in my thumb and first finger went up my arm, it would have gotten to my breathing muscles and eventually either paralyzed me or killed me, because I couldn't breathe. And I was like, oh no, oh my God. And yeah, that was chaos. But what a surprise. When I tell people that story, people are like, oh my gosh, a massage? And I'm like, yeah, you don't really understand that the manipulation they do, and I don't think the woman was trying to harm me. I think it was just an accident, accident that happened. But that's very Saturn on Uranus. Saturn is the physical body, the spine too. When you look at medical astrology, Saturn is the bones in the spine hitting Uranus. So, I always wonder about this, and maybe you have thoughts about this, but like when is the transiting planet hitting the personal planet or the natal planet? Like, do you think there's a difference if it's like Saturn hitting your Uranus as opposed to your transiting Uranus hitting your Saturn? Do you think there's much of a difference, or do you think there's similar kind of outcomes?
I think there's similar themes, but
yeah,
the further out planet is always in charge. So
okay.
like,
so Uranus would be the one in charge no matter what with Saturn and Uranus.
Right. So I think the difference is Uranus conjunct Saturn, as we both saw in both of our situations, that was a surprise, shocking event. Whereas if it was Saturn conjunct Uranus, Saturn would be some kind of limitations. Saturn would try and rein Uranus in a little bit. It would probably be less catastrophic if it was Saturn conjunct Uranus.
Mm-hmm.
It would be the universe telling you need to slow down or calm down a little bit. Whereas with Uranus conjunct Saturn, that's Uranus saying we're going to blow this shit up a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
that's exactly true.
Uranus will dictate to Saturn. Saturn can only suggest.
Yeah,
Uranus can only
theme, right?
Right.
That makes sense.
Just like nothing's going to like outpower a Pluto transit.
Pluto has been my favorite planet for the next one.
Nothing's going to.
Years. Oh my God! I have a stellium in Aquarius, and like it already has hit my sun and crossed it. It's now, well, I don't know. It'll be going backwards to my midheaven again. I have had so many shifts in my life. I could sit here for 3 days to talk about them, but I won't bore everybody with it. And then it's going to my Venus, my Mercury, and my Jupiter. So I'm really just like the rest of the next 15 years, because Jupiter's at like 18 degrees of Aquarius. So that's like the last planet. And then it's gone. But I have several years to go through all of these back and forth Pluto transits. Like Pluto only moves like 4 or 5 degrees in all in a year, because it goes the retrograde and forward. It moves more than that, but when it goes retrograde,
it only moves like 2 to 3 degrees a year.
Okay, I was giving more credit. But yeah, I mean, those transits are like, they're deep, and I have all this cluster of planets in Aquarius. It's like, bring it. I hope I'm the same person.
So I'd say because I have a lot of Pluto stuff happening now, because it's square my Venus and my Mars and my North and South node. But this is for me, this is child's play compared to the Pluto at the end of Capricorn transit, because that was opposite my Moon, Jupiter, midheaven stellium. They're all in the last 10 degrees of Cancer. That was the ass kicker for me. So I would just say what my lesson has been is, whether you want to or not, like I'm going to have to go with the flow a little more, because I never thought I was in control of everything, but I figured there was, my perception was off. And then I thought I had a little bit more say in things than I actually did. And
That's
so
a good point.
so the point here was I'm really in control of very little, and I'm going to be better off, at using my energy to surf the waves instead of trying to pick the ocean up and move it somewhere else. that that's
That
been
might.
my Pluto life lesson at this point.
I think the ocean's heavy. You might just take a drop and you'll be fine. The whole ocean,
Right.
right?
You're or the other stupid analogy that I use is you don't to change the direction the river's flowing, you don't have to move the river. You can just, if you can place a few well placed rocks in it to kind of divert the direction the water's going, that's a lot more doable than, you know, trying to move the entire river. You just have to kind of shift it to flow a little better the direction you want.
That's a good point because I know we're kind of joking around a little bit about things and making light of things that have been difficult for us, but like, why not make light of them? Because what are you going to cry about them? Crying about them doesn't do you any good. It just makes you miserable. So and trust me, enough crying has been done for the wounds that I've sustained from transiting planets, like my neck injury I talked about. But at the same time, I can also say, you know what? I'm not gonna let it beat me up. I'm not gonna let it push me down. So I love that analogy of like taking the rocks in the river to, move it a little bit, change the flow. And you can do that. That's why we want to look at astrology. That's why we want to say, I understand what this feels like. I understand how this works for me. That's why getting on consultation with Mark, who's wonderful, or myself, who I'm not going to say I'm wonderful, but I am, as I'm joking, but I am wonderful. So I'm just kidding though. Not trying to be ego or anything like that. But honestly, getting an astrology consultation or looking at your own chart at least will help you to understand how the universe is really working with you or against you, or if you need to take those rocks and put them in a different order so that they flow better for you. I'm stealing that analogy, by the way. That was wonderful because it's perfect. It's totally perfect. Yeah. I tell people when I do readings for them, whether it's tarot or astrology, like, you get the reading because you want to know what's going on and you want to know if you need to change something in your life and the flow of what's going on. I mean, same thing as the rocks, but the analogy of the rocks is wonderful. So I like that. So yeah. All right.
Yeah, and two, that's I cannot overstate just how fast things are going to be moving. So looking in retrospect to, like, a lot of the Pluto transit for me was like some things have run their natural course, and you're going to need, and that's part of what I love about the Aquarius energy, is it feels emotionally lighter to me, as opposed to
The Capricorn. It's like,
I have an overabundance of water, and like my chart is almost all earth and water.
yeah.
So I have an overabundance of, you know, intense emotions, and I'm feeling that the Pluto and Aquarius really helps, like, take the bite out of that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It helps, just make things feel more chill, and just the Aquarius scientist view of things, um, to where we kind of can emotionally detach and look at things as a process or an event, and not some kind of, Pluto's trying to murder me. I think that's
Yes,
probably whether I'm not saying that Pluto isn't trying to murder us.
it is.
I'm just saying, not feeling that we're under the microscope of the murder attempt 24/7 is I have found it to be beneficial for me.
I have too. And I mean, nothing is inherently good or bad, in my opinion. Like, it might be feeling
Right.
bad or difficult going through this situation, like the whole thing with my neck injury I talked about. That was terrifying and it was awful. But it shifted me in a direction that changed the whole, I don't know. I was a jewelry maker. I made jewelry and that was my main business. And I started astrology school at that point. I would loved astrology forever, my whole life. But at that point, and then it was like the universe had that injury happen and me starting astrology school. And then I was losing function of my right arm, which I took years of therapy to get back. It'll never go back to, well, maybe I should say never, but it's not gone back to where it was. But I couldn't do jewelry making because of that. I had no choice but to let go of that. I couldn't move my arm for so long. And when I did, it was excruciatingly painful, but it projected me to say, okay, well, you just started this astrology school. I think you should probably kick that up a notch. And, here I am. Now I'm a researcher. I'm helping to do conferences. I'm on the board of the Cosmobiology Institute. There's like so many different things. And I'm like, okay, that was a trajectory that was difficult to go through. I'm very hard-headed. Call that Aquarian's fixedness, but I am also like moving through it and I make the best of what I've got, and that's the way you live through life, the best way, and as opposed to just like succumbing to the difficulties, because I mean, life's going to pass you anyway. You might as well like try to make the best of it and like figure out, well, what is this trying to shift in me as opposed to making me hold on to? Because when you hold on to something that isn't supposed to be there, that's when you struggle. That's when you struggle. When you hold on to the job that isn't supposed to be the job, like me doing this jewelry making, which I loved and did for years prior to starting, astrology school. I was already doing archetypal astrology and consultations in that way, but learning an evidence-based approach was just a different level, and it was just the universe aligned in such a perfect way for me in that way. I went through hell, yes, but I also came out in a different way, and, the same thing can be said for so many different transits that are difficult and, that you have to go through in your life. So I think taking that view and seeing, and maybe this is my Capricorn moon too, taking that like witness consciousness kind of thing. So I think that's the Capricorn energy, like taking a step back and looking at life like a chess, like where I can move the pieces to better suit myself. And that's very Saturnian too, because that's a 3D world. I think that's where you end up finding the healing or the positive or the blessing that comes from the challenges that you go through. Because I don't think anything is inherently bad or good. And I know you feel the same way, but it's just, it's just a lot. So yeah. And again, thank you for coming to my second TED Talk. Having a few
have a TED extravaganza. Oh, I remember what I was going to say like 54 minutes ago. We were talking about the planets. I just wanted to. I agree with what you're saying with like the planets are not. The planets can't cause something to happen that's not already there. If you don't have Ebola, Pluto, transiting Pluto is not going to give you Ebola.
No,
the purpose of the planets, they point out things that are already there that are maybe not as apparent or have been hidden for a while. So it's not the planets aren't punishing you. They're just pointing out the things that are already there that maybe you haven't noticed before, that have just kind of been like maybe sitting dormant or something.
Right.
And that's why you can get so many ways that's why the same transit can play out so differently with different people.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it does too, because it can be, but usually you see the underlying theme, like we would call an energy process in vibrational astrology. You can usually see that, but it plays out differently for everybody. It just depends on what's going on in their external environment, because that does have a factor in it. Like it just does. Like you think about if you have two babies born in the same hospital at the same time, they are born to different parents. They have different experiences. They just do. One set of parents might be rich. The other set of parents might be poor and living in poverty. they're going to have different experiences, but they're going to also have the same charts, right? So they're going to have different experiences and but they're going to have things happening in their life that can be triggered by, you know, underlying things like you were just talking about. So let's move on to, oh, were you going to say something?
So Saturn stationing in Aries is definitely going to have a more aggressive and or warlike energy to it.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. I thought for a minute there in June, like we were gonna get into like something WW123. I really did. I wondered for, like, especially when the U.S. got involved. I thought, oh God, but I don't think it's over with. Like now, I don't know if you've seen the headlines recently, but they're saying, oh, they really didn't, only set it back a few months or whatever. And it's like, oh, that regime's got to go. That regime's got to go. That regime is, they're the terrorists. Funders of the entire world.
Like, I mean,
it's not the Iranian people. It's the
right. The people, just like every single country on earth, the government and it's not the people. The government usually has its own agenda and rarely listens to what the people are saying.
Yeah, it really is.
I would not be surprised if there was some kind of retaliatory event from somebody in that July 4th to 13th area.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
That's what that looks like. I mean, Uranus entering Gemini, Saturn and Neptune stationing conjunct each other in Aries, and a full moon. I mean, that doesn't look like calm or peaceful or forgiveness.
No.
It looks like turning everything up to 100.
It looks like karma is kicking you in the booty. Like, you know, it really does. Cause like that, and I say karma in the sense of like what you're giving out. And like, I know karma is different in the sense of like lifetimes of karma, but what you're giving out, what you're putting out, the output is equal to what's in here, you know, there. So that's why aligning yourself with what you feel is right and healthy and good is really important. Keeping your mind in those good places.
Two other quick asides here on the same topic. It took a couple weeks, but I figured with the Saturn and Neptune moving from Pisces to Aries, that the temperatures would skyrocket, that the exceptionally cold, rainy weather we had for a lot of the spring would change, and it did. It took a week or two after Saturn and Neptune were both in Aries, but now it's like heat wave city everywhere, which is kind of what I expected with Saturn and Neptune in Aries. I think we probably talked about that in the show at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
But you can see and so just to back that up, I'd expect this fall that it's probably going to be cooler and maybe wetter than normal. Once Saturn moves back into Pisces, and then when Neptune moves back into Pisces, I think we're going to have a cool, wet fall. But I think it's going to be this steaming hot weather is, I think, going to stick through to the end of August, which it has not done the last several years. The last several years, it has really cooled off once we get to like the middle of August. It's cooled off at least up here, like exceptionally early compared to
what's that word you just
normal.
What's that word you just said? Cooled? What does that word mean? I've never heard that word.
I don't.
Cooled off? I've never heard. I live in South Florida. I don't know what that means.
Yeah. No, you know about the dangers of the weather.
I'm being a smart, but
A second kind of topical astrology note is Aries is personal transportation. So Aries rules cars.
Hmm.
So being that Jupiter's in Cancer now, and we're not really getting too much of the good effects of Cancer, Jupiter in Cancer, because Jupiter has, as soon as it moved into Cancer, it was squaring Saturn and Neptune. So what as Jupiter moves a few degrees on, and Saturn and Neptune are getting ready to retrograde. So Jupiter's going to move a lot quicker away. We should get more of the beneficial transits
From Jupiter.
from Jupiter and Cancer, where what we've gotten so far, I mean, just look at all the hot topics: immigration, ICE, uh, Iran, Ukraine, the World War. Is there a World War going to start? We're
The
seeing missiles and rockets on the news every day. That's Jupiter and Cancer defending the homeland or home people, square Saturn and Neptune and Aries, which is war.
and
So that
ideal.
that's what all
Ideals. Yes.
so that's what all the topics are in the news right now is
Yep.
whose homeland is it? What is a person's official homeland? Square, violence and fighting.
Right. Right. It's really wild. It's
And
what you can't
and
make
I
it up.
think talked we talked a few months back about Jupiter being like pop culture, like what's prevalent in people's minds. I think we talked about movies and music, depending on what sign Jupiter's in, that those things are kind of heavy as far as like movies and music and pop culture and stuff. I think we're seeing that with the, you know, people just being displanted from their homes or, for one reason or another,
Yeah.
square the Saturn and Neptune and Aries.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a
Um,
good point. And that's been happening a lot all over the
and
world.
then, yeah, that's just like a big theme right now everywhere. And another on top of that is I ran across this weird news article that uh, because Aries rules autonomous moving around like cars, personal cars, automobiles is
Hmm.
very much an Aries thing. Like Columbus, Ohio, where I was born, which I'm about 50 minutes from Columbus now. Um, they're having a huge rash of cars crashing into buildings. They've had
Really?
like just this calendar year, they've had over 65 incidents of cars crashing into buildings. I
Wow.
think the norm for a year is like two or three. And we had like 65 up to like the first 6 months of this year.
What is that? Like,
That
why?
that's Jupiter, which is travel, square Saturn and Neptune and Aries. And
Hmm.
Saturn is physical structures like buildings. So that's
Mhm.
people trying to move around and they're crashing into because again, Saturn's the stronger planet between Jupiter and Saturn because
Mhm.
Saturn moves slower. So that's Jupiter moving around and it's crashing into buildings.
Wow, that's intense. I never like put that together, and that's wild. That is totally wild. So then, after all of this, we have Mercury station retrograde at 15 degrees of Leo. Hey, I'm excited about this.
So
It's
you
right
know what?
on Jupiter.
So while Mercury in retrograde is normally just a small hindrance,
Annoying,
I'm gonna
but it's awful.
I I think it yeah I mean compared to the first three big things there for the
Yeah.
month, I I think it may actually be helpful. It may actually save some lives because this all the Mercury retrogrades this year are in fire signs, and all but one of them, they start in a fire sign and then retrograde back into an earth sign or
Mm.
into a water sign. This
Mhm.
is the only one that does it. This one
Oh.
starts July 17th at 15 and a half of Leo. And then it turns direct on August 10th at like 4.5 of Leo. So if used properly, and it probably won't be, this is this this ties into what I said earlier about this is a time to look inward and reflect on what things are not working in your life. And instead of Neptune and Saturn and Aries just blaming everyone and everything that you're unable to change anyways, uh, this is a good time to look at what's not working so you can formulate some plans to fix it this fall before we get into next spring. And the level of chaos that we have in July and August does not permeate for the 2.5 years to 8 years starting next spring. That and I do want to say that in the spring of 2028 things are going to calm down. They're probably not going to calm down before then. But
Mhm.
once Saturn enters Taurus, I think that's going to slow things down.
Mhm.
This next 3 years is just going to go lightning fast. The Saturn and Aries time period is going to go lightning fast
Yeah, it's not going to
because we're
be.
going to have Uranus in Gemini, Pluto in Aquarius, Neptune in Aries. But I think once we get into April of 2028 and Saturn enters Taurus, that's when things are going to slow down and solidify a little bit. We're probably
Interesting.
not going to slow down much between now and then. So
Wow.
this Mercury retrograde will be a good period to see what needs fixing. And you don't have to fix it during this Mercury retrograde period,
What
but
do
you
you
have
think
this
is
fall to put. So you've got a few months like this fall to the end of the year to figure out fixes for what's not working properly.
Mm. That's a good point. That's a good point because it gives you a chance to internalize your thoughts and think about things, retro, you know, type things. So that makes sense. And use it wisely, especially if you have any Leo or Aquarius planets in the first 15 degrees. So that'll be affecting you more. Um, and then moving on, we have the sun going into Leo, which is very benign and chill. I don't think there's like anything terrible with that. There's nothing terrible with
The,
everything. What are you thinking about this?
yeah, so usually that makes things that the only problem we have right now with things entering Leo
It's Pluto.
is and this yes,
Pluto's
exactly.
opposite of the
This
early
moves
Leo, right?
and this coincides with so the when Mercury stations direct in on August 10th, it's going to be at 4 Leo. So it's going to be trine Saturn and Neptune. It's going to be trine to Saturn and Neptune, and it's going to be sextile to Uranus, and it's going to be in opposition to Pluto. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the problems we have is with planets entering Leo now is that first day, those first few degrees, it forms that opposition to Aquarius, to
Mm-hmm.
Pluto and Aquarius. And so then things should chill after that. But uh, the
Yeah,
Leo early degrees of the Leo planets have a lot of energy at their call at this point
yeah,
because they're going
yeah.
to be an aspect the four outer planets after
Yeah,
Uranus moves into Gemini here.
yep, yep. So that's it. That's it. It's exactly it. Any planet shifting signs and all the inner planets move so much quicker, so we might not notice them as deeply. Um, the outer planets, they just move. They're just like mosey, year-long transits, years-long transits and stuff. So that's like it is what it is. But yeah,
I forgot to add. I forgot to add too. The other thing going on for all of July is that Mars is in Virgo for all of July. So uh, Mars in Mars in Virgo is really good when things are calm ish, notwithstanding the Mars and Virgo. If everything else is calm, Mars and Virgo is good because it can let you work
get
and
things
it
done.
can let you make corrections and adjustments. My concern, and I would, Mars has been in Virgo since June 17th, so we've had 10 days of it now. My concern is uh, Christina wants to know how we could forget Mars and Virgo. um, my concern with it is with everything on fire, Mars and Virgo just can take every problem and kind of expand it. I mean, it brings it to your attention so that you can work on it and fix it, but it can be uh, it can spin things out of control really fast because like as Mars moves through Virgo, and two, adding Uranus and so Mars and Virgo is not going to be exactly square Uranus and Gemini at any time during this year,
Mm-hmm.
but both of them being in signs that are square each other, it
Mm-hmm.
can just ramp everything up really quickly. So again, this kind of goes back to what I said earlier about it's going to be super important to pick what you're not going to have. I promise you, you're not going to have any kind of shortage of fire or battles that need to be fought.
Pick them.
You
Make
just
yeah.
you're, you're going to need to pick the ones that are most important because things are going to be going so fast that you're going to get halfway through shit
More
and that's what I would
something.
say has been my big complaint the first 10 days of Mars and Virgo is I'm not really finishing anything. It's everything is just a reshuffling of the deck chairs on the Titanic. It's just it's it's just finding different ways to fix or alleviate the same problems
But we
because
need them
they
to be
just
all
keep
in
coming.
alignment. We need all the chairs to be in to line up and everything in a row, and then comes the tidal wave. Maybe the boat goes on fire. I don't know. It's just like something crazy happens. But everything needs to be lined
Right.
up. All the lifeboats need to be lined up. Oh my gosh, I'm being silly, but that's
Yeah,
true. It's like very
yeah.
Mars Virgo.
My concern is that all the problems that need fixed are going to make themselves apparent, but it's finding the time to fix them correctly is going to be
That's
the
not
issue.
working. Right. Right. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So last thing we have here is our Venus going into Cancer at the end of the month. This is actually not. This is a decent transit. Venus and Cancer. Although I follow this guy. I forget what his name is. He does these little reels of the zodiac. It's hysterical. Although I don't agree with all of it, I think it's hysterical. But he always jokes around about Cancer, and Cancer being like the thug, even the secret thug, because they're all loving and nurturing, but they're also like very protective, which is so true. So, like Venus and Cancer,
They're the crab.
they're the
They're the
crab,
crab.
right? And like it's not that they're soft and lovey and all that stuff, but they have that hard external shell. I mean, my daddy was a Cancer, so like had a Cancer sun and other Cancer planets, but he's super loving and all of that. But at the same time, like don't f with his family, like no, No.
You can you can walk over cancers until the day that you can't.
Until the day you
And
can't.
when that day
And then the knife comes out.
and
That's what happens.
until that till the day that you can't, and that day will be very apparent.
Yeah, and you know this personally,
So,
don't you?
means
Like
to the
there's some planets in Cancer.
yeah.
You know this
So
personally.
too the uh, I posted this morning about if you're a Cancer, if you're having your solar return this week, you've got Jupiter conjunct your Sun in your solar return chart. So that's super good, but just be aware that Jupiter is square Saturn and Neptune, so you may not feel the full benefit of that until Jupiter moves a couple degrees past Saturn and Neptune.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, good or bad, it can be conflate badness, difficulties.
No,
Jupiter just makes things big, right?
The normal Cancer patience and tolerance is kind of missing right now. It's again, Saturn and Neptune outweigh Jupiter. That's two planets further out. They're both further out than Jupiter, so that the Jupiter Cancer benefits are being outweighed a little bit.
Yeah, that makes sense. This was an awesome show. We did a long one. But this month we needed it because this month and then next month, oh my gosh, there's so much going on. I think what I'll do is end up putting my vibration stuff in the description because it's only a few things in this part of the month. And it goes into August more, actually in August. But there are some vibrational things going on too. I'll just throw it in the description, a little bit of information in there after we're done here, so you guys can read it. And of course, you can always follow my blog too at my website, starlingbrighter.com, and just look at the blog because I write about things too. And I mean, this was a fun show because it was lively and we've got a lot going on. Do you have any last words for people for this month of July?
So here's, as all of our viewers know, I'm a list maker. I have found, just with the crazy weather we're having up here, and with all the crazy behaviors of people and things, I found that I need to have 2 or 3 lists for each day of what I want to get done, because I'm finding almost every day now what I want to work on and what I think I'm going to get to work on, that's usually blown up by like the first 2 or 3 hours I'm awake. Usually that plan is changing every day.
Mm-hmm.
So I have multiple lists of what, if it's nice outside, I can get this stuff done. If these people are at work or whatever, I can get these things done. But I have alternate lists to where, okay, if everything goes to shit really quickly, which is almost every day now, I have a revised list, or my couple highlight points of things I need to get done. Or if my plans get changed, like today I have an outside list of things to work on, and I have an inside list of things to work on. Just depending on the, we're supposed to may have thunderstorms later, and it's pretty hot right now, so I try not to be too stubborn. I try to go with the flow a little bit.
Yeah. But I really want to know one thing. This is really important. Do you have a list of your lists?
For some things, I do have lists of things to work on. And I find that keeps my brain happier
This is my
because
list of lists.
all I have to yeah,
I
all I
can't.
have to do yes, top of mind. Um, if I just have to remember where my one list is,
Right,
then
and
I
then you'll
don't have to wait brain right. Or if I have I often have a list in my wallet, just so that I can add to it or check it during the day
wow.
to see what things I'll be able to work on, be able to get off of it. Then I don't have to keep in my brain what things I got done and what things I didn't.
So your advice is take lists and make lists of your lists, right? And
Oh,
then your lists of your lists of your lists.
no, I totally forgot what my point was. My point was try to go with the flow as much as like I can't ever have days where I don't get anything done. So I've realized I'm not going to get things done in the order that in my brain is the most functional and most productive way. So I just try to be easy on myself with get some
Yeah.
of the things off your list done.
Yeah, as much as you can, just do what you can. That's the best thing. That's what I do.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I at least used to have a bad habit of just if I don't get to do the things that I think need done first, then I would just be disheveled the entire day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I try not to do that anymore.
Like beat yourself up because you didn't get all of the things accomplished. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. And Christina in the chat says Bach flower essence rock water. I've never tried that one, but I know a Bach flower essence helps with going with the flow. And she says she's basically drinking it. I know it's drops, right? So I'll have to
I
look it up.
I don't have that one. I do
Yeah.
know that we do have a collection of the Bach flower essences in our vitamin essential oil cabinet downstairs.
Yeah. I have a couple of them too, but not that one. So I'll have to try that one out. Rock water sounds like my kind of thing because of all the rocks and crystals and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was fun. I really enjoyed today talking about the intensity of July. Thank you everybody for watching. And Mark, as always, thank you for being my partner in this. Yeah, and we'll
Thank you.
see you guys on the next one. All right. Bye.
Bye.